What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. For today's video, we're going to be re-ranking from worst to best the Bumblebee movie Studio Series figures. This is to include some pretty big new entries due to the introduction of the line's concept art series, and to my surprise there are a lot of characters to get through, despite the movie often being referred to as the Bumblebee solo film. So let's transform and roll out to the weakest entry on this list, which, without any doubt at all, is going to the car mode version of Shatter. Damn, this is a figure which quite literally lives up to her name. Honestly, one of the most frustrating Transformers ever to be released. First of all, let's talk about the build quality. Almost everything wants to pop off. The shoulders, the backpack, and the front side of the car are near impossible to keep intact. The head sculpt is severely slacking, so much so that I had to turn to DNA Design for an upgrade. She's so cluttered that posing is an absolute chore. Even then, it's a struggle to get her to look actually decent. The only saving grace would be the land-based vehicle form, but that's if you can get her there without this thing literally exploding into a billion pieces. Splitting their way into spot number 17, we have Cybertronian Cliffjumper and B127. These two are joined as they're more or less exactly the same, so where to start with these two? From the front, they look decent, but the second you turn them to the side, damn, they are quite literally Ninja Turtles in disguise. Nothing properly tabs in. Handling these two is super frustrating. They're not enjoyable to mess with or even to transform due to Hasbro's persistent use of clear, thin, cheap plastic. Their alt modes look great though, and are surprisingly some of the strongest from this subline, as at least in the case of Bumblebee, it did actually appear in the movie. Stinging his way into spot number 17, we have the Volkswagen Beetle Bumblebee. Surprisingly, what used to be the line's worst entry now finds himself slightly higher up on the list. Perhaps in the past, I did treat this figure slightly too harshly. Overall, it's not terrible. Unlike some of the other figures featured on this list, it actually stays together in one piece. Although, as you'll see from most of the earlier Bumblebee movie figures, he unfortunately isn't all that accurate to how he finally looked in the movie. The door wings are a carryover from when initially Bumblebee was supposed to be a straight up prequel to the Michael Bay films. I also think they tried to cram way too much into what has to be one of the smallest deluxe figures ever. The figure overall just feels fiddly. One of the biggest redeeming factors though would be the return of the iconic Volkswagen Beetle, which does look awesome, although overall this is definitely a design which I would love to see properly revisited again in the future. Drop kicking his way into the 15th spot, we have the helicopter version of Dropkick. Now, to be honest, as a standalone figure, it's actually not too bad. To be fair, I have actually quite grown to like the design in recent years. My only big issue would be that once again, the figure really isn't all that accurate to how he finally appeared in the movie. I feel like this design overall would definitely better fit the character of Well in comparison to Dropkick. The transformation though is straight up bonkers, and the helicopter mode is most definitely the star of the show. It is just a shame that what undoubtedly have to be two of the best looking Decepticons in a long time have to be by far two of the most inaccurate looking figures that I think we've seen released in the last few years. Shattering her way into spot number 15, we have the jet mode version of Shatter. Now overall, this is a pretty big improvement in comparison to the past version, but still far from perfect. The sculpting and the paint look great. She finally comes with her proper movie accurate head sculpt. The articulation though unfortunately is quite limited, mainly again just due to her design. I think the biggest issue when it comes down to this character is that she is a deluxe class. They're trying to cram as much as possible into a tiny space that ultimately just ends up creating a Kibblsaurus. The Harrier jump jet though looks wicked, really accurate to the movie. I just hope that this is the design that in general we can see revisited again in the future, maybe as a full-blown Voyager class. Slamming their way into spot number 13, we have Ironhide and Ratchet. Once again, these two are joined just because they're so similar when it comes around to design, much like how they originally appeared in the OG G1 series. Overall, two very good looking designs. I think I prefer Ironhide over Ratchet just because I do find him to be the more visually appealing between the two, although the articulation I definitely find to be quite limited, especially when it comes to the arms. This is mainly due to the size of their chests, although in their defense, the vehicle modes for both look super cool, and overall they are great looking figures, but to be honest guys, I just don't favour them as much as I do some of the other entries on this list. Scouting his way into spot number 12, we have the concept art series Sunstreaker, a character who unfortunately just never made the final cut of the movie, but it is super cool to finally see a live action movie take on this character. A really good looking robot mode, one that I do definitely think fits in with the rest of the B-movie crew. The articulation though, I do find to be a little clunky, especially when it comes to the upper arms. The transformation though is sleek and the vehicle mode looks great. It's kind of a Cybertronian Lambo, so I guess it's quite cool that even when in vehicle mode, he is still taking inspiration from his original G1 design. Popping his way into spot number 11, we have the car mode version of Dropkick. Such an upgrade accuracy-wise in comparison to the helicopter version. We do actually see him exactly like this very briefly in the movie when he and Shatter very first land on Earth. The robot mode I think looks great, like another character further up on this list. One of the best looking Decepticons that I think we've seen in a long time. The articulation though is standard at best, a little outdated in comparison to what we have come to expect at this point. The transformation though is nuts for a deluxe class, and the vehicle mode looks great. Honestly, very little to complain about besides the fact that we are yet to see a full-blown triple changer for both him and Shatter in the Studio Series lineup. Gunning his way into spot number 10, we have Brawn. He is literally a mini tank. What an awesome retake on this classic G1 minibot. Such a spot-on match to how he very briefly appeared in the movie, and if anything, the figure gives us a better look at the CG design than the movie itself did. Great details, wicked paint apps, and overall decent articulation. The vehicle mode I also think is pretty cool, and the throwbacks to his original G1 form continue, especially when it comes around to that weapon integration. I will be honest though, I can't say that I'm the biggest fan of the big gap in the back of the vehicle form. Kinda looks unfinished and I think easily could have been remedied, but none of these guys actually transformed in the movie, so to be honest with you guys, this isn't a deal breaker in the slightest. Coming out of hiding in spot number 9, we have Blitzwing. Definitely not to be confused with Starscream, despite visually appearing to be almost exactly the same. One of the best Earth-based live-action movie Decepticon designs that I think we've had in years. This guy looked badass. His Studio Series release was anticipated, I believe, for a good 2 years, and it absolutely delivered. The robot mode looked awesome. He came stacked with accessories, including the Electron Spike, which was used to rip Bumblebee's vocal processor from his neck. When it comes to weak points though, I do think the entire upper torso can become a little too easily detached. It definitely can become annoying, especially during general posing, and the alt mode, whilst definitely does do the trick, unfortunately isn't officially licensed, which I do think for a Studio Series figure is a bit of a missed opportunity. Destroying the Autobots and launching his way into spot number 8, we have Shockwave. Greetings, Earth creatures! A long-awaited update to his core class counterpart, and one that I think mostly delivered. The figure is big and imposing, and arguably one of the largest Voyagers that we've seen when it comes round to the main line in recent years. Due to most of these guys unfortunately not transforming in the movie, the figure is near spot on, front side to back. The only real big downside would be that when it comes round to articulation, it definitely appears to be super outdated, and unfortunately is lacking bicep rotation. The transformation and the alt mode, whilst definitely do the trick, unfortunately do come across as being a little weak. They pretty much took what we saw from the core class version to create a semi-decent looking tank. Overall, it's definitely a good figure, but I don't think it's nowhere near perfect. Communicating his way into spot number 7, we have Soundwave, one of the most iconic designs to come from that Bumblebee movie. The figure's robot mode is spot on, literally not a fault in sight. The spring-loaded cassette deck I think is wicked, and the compatibility with the other minions is sick. The letdowns would be that unfortunately the articulation I do find to be a little awkward, especially when it comes down to the shoulders, and the alt mode is straight up trash. Unfortunately by far one of the weakest Cybertronian forms, which I think we've so far seen from this line. Even to this date, I still have no idea what it's supposed to be. Coronating his way into the 6th spot, we have Starscream. Undeniably a controversial spot, and this entry will also cover the places for the remaining Seekers, due to them all pretty much being the same. I've always thought that this figure was great, a fantastic size for a modern Voyager, stacked when it comes around to parts count, and overall just a really faithful design, again harkening back to the original G1 roots. Very good articulation, complex transformation, despite popular belief the Tetrajet is actually super close to the final design, and again throws it all the way back to the very first time that we see the Seekers in the original G1 episode. Racing her way into spot number 5, we have RC. I think arguably the best design that this character has ever had. It still keeps the essence of her original G1 counterpart, yet she doesn't become weighed down by a big ass backpack. It's super close to her on-screen CG model. Even the Cybertronian bike form, despite never appearing in the movie, just fits the character so well, and doesn't in any way compromise the robot mode in the slightest. Overall an absolute banger, and by far one of the best looking mainline RC figures that I think we've ever seen released. Inventing his way into spot number 4, we have Wheeljack, arguably the best looking Cybertronian Deluxe that I think we've so far seen. Again, it takes everything that was so iconic about that original G1 design and just brings it to the big screen. Such a perfect design that surely we're going to see it make a return in the next live action movie, right Paramount? Solid articulation, great detail, intricate transformation, despite unfortunately not appearing in the most recent Rise of the Beast movie. This is most definitely a design which I would love to once again make a return in hopefully the next installment. Dominating his way into spot number 3, we have the concept art Bumblebee movie Megatron. The live action design that we've all been waiting for, and one which I definitely think we deserve. We were robbed of not seeing this design. He was supposed to show up during the end credits of the Bumblebee movie, being held in cryogenic stasis by Sector 7, but Paramount still can't decide if Bumblebee is supposed to be a prequel or a reboot, so unfortunately he was savagely cut. He's a great translation from G1 into live action, despite unfortunately never appearing in the movie. He still blends in great with some of the other characters. He's likely to have by far the best articulation of any Studio Series figure. The only real big downside would be that for a leader class figure, the engineering is super weak. The alt modes for the line's first ever triple changer are really quite bad. There are no rolling wheels on the tank, and the jet mode is a straight up train wreck. Overall though, still a great looking robot mode, and a design which I hope to eventually see on the big screen. Crashing into spot number 2, we have the off-road Bumblebee. Firstly, the price point. For a deluxe class figure, this guy is wicked, likely to be by far the most accurate Bumblebee based off the Solo movie. The figure quite literally has no backpack, which is spot on to the actual CG design. He's also packing some great articulation, a very nicely engineered transformation, and by far one of the joys of this guy being a Studio Series release is that he is packing an official Jeep license, which I think is sick. It's so cool to see something original for Bumblebee instead of the same old rinse and repeat Volkswagen Beetle or Camaro. Overall, by far one of my personal favourite Bumblebee figures, and a design that, much like Wheeljack, I would love to see make a return in the next live action movie. Commanding his way into spot number 1, we have the Bumblebee movie Optimus Prime. This was a banging return to form for the Autobot leader. It is quite simply the perfect blend of live action in G1, and this was definitely a design which I wish we saw way more of in the movie, especially when paired alongside the line's Megatron. Impeccable articulation, amazing plastic quality, detailed literally front side to back, and he also comes packing with an incredibly intricate transformation which results in a very well built G1 style truck mode, and one which I personally think destroys literally any of the other Optimus Prime figures from this lineup. If you are a fan of Optimus Prime, and I mean who isn't, then you owe it to yourself to experience what has to be one of the best mainline primes of all time. Now, that's a wrap when it comes round to the Bumblebee movie lineup. With the exception of a few potential repaints and conceptualized characters, I believe that is every prominent on-screen character that has so far been released. And what a fantastic lineup! Almost every single one of these entries could be considered as the gold standard for Studio Series, and I would love to get your guys' thoughts down below. I want to thank you all so much for watching, and until my next video, transform and roll out!